No roads, no stores, no neighbors for miles. Out there in the wilderness, families faced a brutal choice: build a life from nothing or watch everything fall apart. The frontier was unforgiving. If a family wanted to survive, they needed the right tools that could turn raw wilderness into a working homestead. They needed axes that could fell trees and build cabins. They needed rifles that could put meat on the table and keep predators at bay. They needed traps, saws, and knives that had been tested by generations of frontiersmen. Every tool mattered. One missing piece of equipment, one broken blade, and an entire family could face starvation, exposure, or death. Winter didn't care if you were prepared. Disease didn't care if you had medicine. Wild animals didn't care if you had weapons. The families who survived had the right tools. They knew how to use them. But what tools did pioneer families actually rely on? What were the 10 essential items that separated successful homesteaders from those who didn't survive their first year? Between 1,800 and 1,890, over 6 million Americans moved west to claim new land and build new lives. But the popular image of pioneers loading up wagons with household goods misses the brutal reality of frontier life. Weight limits on wagons meant families had to choose carefully. And the families who survived were the ones who chose the right tools. Each tool on this list served multiple critical functions, and losing any one of them could doom an entire family's prospects for survival. Number 1. The broadaxe. The broadaxe was the master tool of frontier construction, but calling it just an axe misses its true sophistication. The head weighed between 3 and 5 pounds, with a blade that extended 8 to 12 inches across. But the real engineering was in the asymmetrical design. One side was flat, the other beveled, allowing a skilled user to hew perfectly flat surfaces on round logs. The handle, or helve, was carefully shaped from hickory or ash, with a specific curve that allowed the user to work close to the log surface without scraping their knuckles. The length varied from 12 to 16 inches, and experienced woodsmen could tell the quality of an axe just by feeling the balance point. But the broadaxe wasn't just for construction. In the hands of a skilled frontiersman, it became a weapon that could split a skull as easily as it split firewood. Native American warriors learned to respect the reach and power of a man with a broadaxe, and many frontier battles were decided by settlers who knew how to use their construction tools as instruments of war. The maintenance was critical. A dull broadaxe was worse than useless. It was dangerous. Families carried whetstones and files, and sharpening the blade was a daily ritual. The edge had to be perfect, because a glancing blow could send the axe into a leg instead of the log. A man with a sharp broadaxe can build a house, clear a field, and defend his family. A man with a dull one can do none of these things, wrote frontier carpenter James Morrison in 1834. The versatility was what made it essential. Beyond construction and defense, the broadaxe could process firewood, butcher large game, and even serve as an anvil for basic metalwork. Pioneer families who lost their broadaxe often abandoned their claims, because replacing it meant a journey of hundreds of miles to the nearest blacksmith. Number 2. The flintlock rifle. The flintlock rifle was the lifeline between a pioneer family and starvation, but it was far more sophisticated than most people realized. The Pennsylvania long rifle, developed by German gunsmiths in the 1720s, was a precision instrument that could put a ball through a playing card at 100 yards in the hands of a skilled marksman. The barrel length ranged from 40 to 48 inches, with spiral grooves called rifling that spun the ball for accuracy. The flintlock mechanism was a marvel of 18th century engineering. When the trigger was pulled, a piece of flint struck a steel frizzen, creating sparks that ignited gunpowder in the pan, which then ignited the main charge in the barrel. But the real skill was in the loading and maintenance. Each shot required measuring the exact amount of black powder, ramming down a patch and ball, and priming the pan. An experienced frontiersman could load and fire 3 times per minute, but most took their time to ensure accuracy. The rifle had to function in rain, snow, and freezing temperatures. Moisture was the enemy. A wet pan meant no spark, and no spark meant no shot. Experienced hunters carried their powder in waterproof horns and kept spare flints wrapped in oiled leather. Ammunition was precious. Lead balls had to be cast from melted lead, and gunpowder was expensive and hard to replace. Every shot had to count, which is why frontier marksmen developed legendary accuracy. Missing wasn't just embarrassing, it was potentially fatal. The rifle also served as a deterrent. The crack of a long rifle could be heard for miles, and hostile forces learned to respect the range and accuracy of American frontier firearms. Many conflicts were avoided simply because potential attackers knew they were facing armed and skilled opponents. Number 3. The Cast Iron Dutch Oven. The Dutch oven was the heart of frontier cooking, but it was engineered for far more than just boiling water. The thick cast iron walls distributed heat evenly, while the tight-fitting lid trapped moisture and flavor. The flat bottom sat stable on coals, while the rimmed lid held more coals on top, creating an oven effect that could bake bread as perfectly as any kitchen range. The size mattered. Most families carried a 12-inch Dutch oven that could feed 6 to 8 people, but the weight was substantial. Nearly 20 pounds of iron that had to be transported across hundreds of miles of rough terrain. But families who left their Dutch oven behind quickly learned why it was essential. The versatility was unmatched. It could fry, bake, roast, boil, and stew. It could render fat, make soap, and even serve as a wash basin. The lid could be flipped over and used as a griddle for pancakes or a skillet for bacon. In winter, it could be filled with hot coals and used as a bed warmer. Maintenance was critical but simple. The iron had to be kept seasoned with animal fat to prevent rust, and it had to be cleaned carefully to preserve the non-stick coating that developed over years of use. A well-maintained Dutch oven would last for generations, and many pioneer families passed them down as precious heirlooms. The cooking techniques required skill and experience. Managing the coals above and below required understanding of heat distribution and timing. Too many coals and the food burned. Too few and it never cooked properly. Experienced frontier cooks could judge temperature by holding their hand over the coals and counting seconds. The social aspect was equally important. The Dutch oven was often the centerpiece of community gatherings, capable of feeding large groups during barn raisings, harvest celebrations, and religious meetings. It represented hospitality, abundance, and the civilizing influence of good food in the wilderness. Number 4. The Steel Trap. The steel trap was the key to the fur trade that opened the American frontier, but it was also a precision instrument that required deep knowledge of animal behavior and mechanical engineering. The most common design was the foothold trap, with spring-loaded jaws that snapped shut when an animal stepped on the trigger pan. The construction was deceptively simple but critically important. The springs had to be strong enough to hold a struggling beaver or wolf, but sensitive enough to trigger from the light step of a marten or fox. The jaws had to close quickly, but not so violently that they damaged the valuable pelt. Trap sizes were standardized by the animals they were designed to catch: 1 trap for muskrat and mink, 2 for fox and raccoon, 3 for beaver and otter, and 4 for wolf and bear. Each size required different setting techniques and different bait or lure strategies. The setting was an art form that took years to master. The trap had to be placed exactly where the animal would step, concealed so it wouldn't be detected, and secured so a caught animal couldn't escape with the trap. The chain length, anchor point, and water depth all had to be calculated precisely. Weather was a constant enemy. Freezing temperatures could make the springs brittle and slow. Rain could wash away scent lures. Snow could bury the trap or make it visible to wary animals. Successful trappers learned to read weather patterns and adjust their techniques accordingly. The economic impact was enormous. A successful trapper could earn more in one season than a farmer made in 3 years. Beaver pelts sold for 6 to 8 each when a laborer earned 1 per day. A single trap line could support an entire family and provide the cash needed to buy land, tools, and supplies. But trapping was dangerous work. Trappers worked alone in remote areas, often hundreds of miles from help. A broken leg, a bear attack, or a fall through ice could be fatal. The men who succeeded were tough, skilled, and incredibly self-reliant. The knowledge required was extensive. Successful trappers had to understand animal behavior, weather patterns, water levels, and seasonal movements. They had to be able to read tracks, identify scat, and predict where animals would travel. This knowledge often came from Native American tribes who had been trapping these animals for centuries. Number 5. The hunting knife. The hunting knife was the most personal and versatile tool a frontiersman owned, but it was far more than just a blade. The best knives were forged from high-carbon steel that could hold a razor edge while remaining flexible enough not to break under heavy use. The blade length typically ranged from 6 to 10 inches, with a curved or straight edge depending on the intended use. The handle was equally important, usually made from antler, bone, or hardwood that provided a secure grip even when wet with blood. The tang, the part of the blade that extended into the handle, had to be full length and properly secured, because a loose handle could be deadly when processing large game or defending against predators. The versatility was what made it essential. Beyond butchering game, the hunting knife served as an eating utensil, a tool for preparing other tools, a weapon for close combat, and even a surgical instrument for treating wounds. Many frontiersmen carried only one knife, so it had to perform every cutting task they encountered. Maintenance was a daily ritual. The blade had to be kept sharp with whetstones, cleaned after every use, and oiled to prevent rust. The edge geometry was critical. Too steep, and it wouldn't cut cleanly through hide. Too shallow, and it would dull quickly on bone. Experienced users could sharpen their knives to different angles for different tasks. The techniques for using the knife efficiently took years to master. Skinning an animal without puncturing the hide required understanding of anatomy and muscle structure. Butchering required knowledge of joints, grain direction, and preservation methods. A skilled frontiersman could process an entire deer in under an hour, wasting nothing. A man's knife is the measure of his skill and the guardian of his life. Keep it sharp, and it will keep you alive, wrote mountain man Hugh Glass in his journal in 1823. The knife also served as a status symbol and trade item. A well-made knife could be traded for horses, furs, or other valuable goods. Native American tribes prized European steel knives and would trade extensively for quality blades. The psychological aspect was equally important. A man with a sharp knife felt confident and prepared. The weight of the blade on his belt was a constant reminder that he had the tools to survive whatever the wilderness threw at him. In a world where self-reliance meant the difference between life and death, the hunting knife was the ultimate symbol of independence and capability. Number 6. The crosscut saw. The crosscut saw revolutionized frontier construction, but it was a tool that required two men working in perfect coordination. The blade ranged from 4 to 12 feet in length, with specially designed teeth that cut on both the push and pull strokes. The handles were positioned to allow maximum leverage while keeping both operators safely away from the cutting area. The tooth design was critical engineering. Cutting teeth removed wood fibers, while raker teeth cleared the sawdust from the cut. The set, the slight bend of alternating teeth, determined how wide the cut would be and how easily the saw would move through the wood. A properly set saw could cut through green hardwood without binding or jamming. The technique required skill and teamwork. Both men had to pull with equal force and maintain the same rhythm. One man pulling too hard or too fast would cause the saw to bind or break. The saw had to be kept level and straight, with steady pressure that let the teeth do the work rather than forcing the cut. Maintenance was constant and critical. The teeth had to be sharpened regularly with special files, and the set had to be maintained with a tool called a saw set. A dull saw was not only inefficient, it was dangerous, because the extra force required could cause the blade to snap and send sharp steel flying. The impact on frontier development was enormous. Before the crosscut saw, felling large trees required days of work with axes and wedges. With the saw, two men could drop, limb, and buck a tree into usable lumber in a single day. This speed allowed pioneers to build substantial structures quickly before winter weather made construction impossible. The saw also enabled the lumber industry that built America. Sawmills used larger versions of the same technology to turn forests into the boards, beams, and planks that built cities. The crosscut saw was the tool that transformed America from a wilderness into a nation of wooden buildings. But the saw was also dangerous. The long, flexible blade could snap without warning, sending sharp steel in unpredictable directions. The cutting area had to be kept clear of bystanders, and both operators had to understand the forces involved in tree felling. A tree falling the wrong direction could kill everyone in the area. Number 7. The water barrel. The water barrel was essential infrastructure for frontier families, but it was also a sophisticated piece of cooperage that required precise craftsmanship. The staves had to be cut from seasoned hardwood, shaped to exact curves, and fitted together so tightly that the barrel would hold water without leaking for years. The construction was a marvel of engineering without nails or glue. The staves were held together by iron hoops that compressed the wood into a watertight seal. The head, the flat top and bottom pieces, were fitted into grooves cut into the staves, creating a joint that actually got tighter as the wood swelled with moisture. The size was standardized for practical reasons. A 50-gallon barrel weighed about 400 pounds when full, which was the maximum that 2 men could move safely. Smaller barrels were easier to handle but required more frequent refilling. Larger barrels were too heavy to move and too difficult to clean properly. Water quality was a constant concern. The barrel had to be kept clean to prevent contamination, but cleaning required emptying and scrubbing the interior with sand and salt. The wood itself helped purify the water. Tannins in the oak killed bacteria and improved the taste, while the tight grain filtered out sediment. The barrel also served multiple purposes beyond water storage. It could hold grain, salt pork, or other preserved foods. In winter, it could be partially filled and used as a root cellar for vegetables. During construction, it could be used as a mixing vessel for mortar or plaster. Transportation was always a challenge. Full barrels were too heavy for one person to move, so they had to be positioned carefully and refilled in place. Many families built their cabins near water sources, specifically to minimize the distance water had to be carried. The economic value was substantial. A well-made barrel cost as much as a month's wages for a laborer, but it would last for decades with proper care. Families who lost their water barrel often had to abandon their claims because replacing it required either a long journey to a cooper or the skills to make one themselves. Number 8. The spinning wheel. The spinning wheel was the foundation of frontier textile production, but it was also a precision instrument that required years of practice to master. The wheel used a drive band to transfer power from the large wheel to a smaller spindle, creating the high-speed rotation needed to twist fibers into strong thread. The mechanics were deceptively complex. The spinner had to coordinate the speed of the wheel, the tension of the drive band, and the movement of her hands to create thread of consistent thickness and strength. Too much tension and the thread would break. Too little and it wouldn't twist properly. The rhythm had to be perfect, with the wheel speed matching the rate at which fibers were fed onto the spindle. The preparation work was equally important. Raw wool had to be cleaned, carded, and combed to align the fibers before spinning. Flax had to be retted, broken, and hackled to separate the usable fibers from the woody stems. Each type of fiber required different techniques and produced different qualities of thread. The skill level required was substantial. An experienced spinner could produce thread so fine and strong that it rivaled factory-made products. The thread could be spun thick for heavy work clothes or thin for fine garments. Different twist levels created thread suitable for different purposes. Loose twist for soft fabrics, tight twist for strong rope. The economic impact was enormous. A family with a spinning wheel could produce their own clothing, bedding, and rope, saving hundreds of dollars per year in purchased goods. The thread could also be traded or sold, providing cash income that was often the difference between prosperity and poverty. The social aspect was equally important. Spinning was often done in groups, with women gathering to work and socialize while their wheels hummed together. These spinning bees were important social events that strengthened community bonds and shared knowledge about techniques and patterns. The wheel also represented women's economic power on the frontier. While men cleared land and built structures, women controlled textile production, which was essential for family survival. A skilled spinner was valued in the community and could command respect and influence through her abilities. But the wheel required constant maintenance. The drive band had to be replaced regularly, the wheel had to be kept properly oiled, and the spindle had to be maintained in perfect balance. A broken spinning wheel could leave a family without the ability to make clothing, which could be fatal in harsh climates. If you're interested in learning more about how frontier families processed other materials for survival, check out our episode on traditional leather working techniques that kept pioneers clothed and equipped. Number 9. The plow. The plow was the tool that made permanent settlement possible, but frontier plows were engineered for conditions that would destroy ordinary farm equipment. The prairie sod was so tough and dense that it broke conventional plows, leading to the development of specialized braking plows with reinforced construction and innovative designs. The mold board was the critical component, shaped to lift and turn the soil in a continuous ribbon. The curve had to be precisely calculated to roll the sod over completely, burying the grass and exposing fresh earth for planting. The steel had to be hard enough to hold an edge, but tough enough not to shatter when hitting rocks or roots. The share, the cutting edge, was designed to slice through the toughest sod with minimal draft. The angle and shape determined how easily the plow would pull and how cleanly it would cut. A dull or poorly shaped share could double the work required and produce inferior results. The construction had to withstand enormous stresses. Breaking prairie sod required pulling forces of over 10 pounds, transmitted through the plow frame to the cutting edge. The joints had to be reinforced, the materials had to be the best available, and the design had to distribute stress evenly to prevent failure. The technique required skill and experience. The depth had to be consistent to ensure even planting conditions. The speed had to be steady to maintain proper soil turnover. The furrows had to be straight and evenly spaced to maximize the planted area and facilitate cultivation. The impact on frontier development was transformative. Before effective plows, breaking prairie sod was nearly impossible. With the right plow and sufficient draft animals, a farmer could break several acres per day, creating fields that would feed his family and provide surplus crops for sale. The economic implications were enormous. Broken land was worth 10 times more than unbroken prairie. A family with a good plow and strong oxen could create valuable farmland from worthless wilderness, building wealth that would support future generations. But plowing was dangerous work. The heavy equipment and powerful animals could cause serious injuries. Plow handles could break and send sharp wood flying. Oxen could bolt or become entangled in the harness. The work required constant attention and respect for the forces involved. The plow is the sword that conquers the wilderness, turning wild land into the foundation of civilization, wrote agricultural reformer John Deere in 1838. The plow also represented commitment and permanence. A family that invested in a breaking plow was planning to stay, to transform the land rather than just extract resources from it. It was a declaration of intent to build a lasting settlement rather than a temporary camp. Number 10. The medical kit. The Frontier Medical Kit was a carefully assembled collection of medicines and instruments that could handle the most common medical emergencies. But it was also a testament to the medical knowledge that frontier families had to possess, because using these tools incorrectly could be more dangerous than the original problem. The medicines were chosen for versatility and stability. Laudanum, tincture of opium, was the primary painkiller and could also treat diarrhea and cough. Calomel, mercurous chloride, was used for fever and as a purgative. Quinine treated malaria and other fevers. Ipecac induced vomiting to treat poisoning. Each medicine had multiple uses, but also serious side effects if used incorrectly. The surgical instruments were basic but essential. A sharp knife for cutting, forceps for removing foreign objects, needles and thread for suturing wounds, and a bone saw for amputations. The quality had to be excellent because there was no opportunity to replace broken or inferior tools. The knowledge required was extensive. Frontier families had to understand basic anatomy, recognize symptoms of common diseases, and know how to treat wounds, set bones, and deliver babies. This knowledge often came from medical books, but practical experience was gained through necessity and often tragic trial and error. Sterilization was primitive but critical. Instruments were cleaned with alcohol or boiled in water to prevent infection. Wounds were cleaned with whiskey or vinegar. Bandages were made from clean cloth and changed regularly. The understanding of germs was limited, but practical experience taught the importance of cleanliness. The psychological impact was as important as the medical value. A family with a well-stocked medical kit felt more confident about facing the dangers of frontier life. The knowledge that they could treat injuries and illnesses gave them the courage to venture into remote areas where help was not available. The economic value was substantial. A serious injury that required a trip to a distant doctor could cost months of income and might not be successful anyway. The ability to treat problems at home saved money and often saved lives by providing immediate care when time was critical. But the medical kit also represented the isolation and self-reliance that defined frontier life. Families had to be prepared to handle medical emergencies on their own, with whatever knowledge and supplies they possessed. The responsibility was enormous, and the consequences of failure were often fatal. These 10 tools weren't just equipment. They were the foundation of American expansion and the keys to transforming a continent. Each one represented generations of refinement, testing, and improvement by people whose lives depended on getting it right. The families who succeeded on the frontier were the ones who understood that survival wasn't about luck or toughness. It was about having the right tools and the knowledge to use them effectively.